Hey church, it's wonderful to be with you and to bring you another daily hope. Today our text is Psalm 32, which is a psalm of David, and it's him doing what he does best, being raw and vulnerable, just ripping open his heart and showing us the beauty and the brokenness of his humanity. He's wrestling with confession, this idea of confession and the weight of sin and guilt. And before I jump into that, a quick note. A few years back, I read this tiny little book by the renowned Old Testament theologian Walter Brueggemann, and he makes this great observation. He says all of the Psalms, which have been so great to read during this time, can be kind of split into three categories. The first are these Psalms of orientation, ones where the psalmist is clear-eyed, has his feet on the ground, and sees God truly for who he is, and praises him. Then you've got these Psalms of disorientation, and that's where the chaos of life, where grief, suffering, death, sin, injustice come crashing into our lives like a wrecking ball. And the psalmist is pouring out their heart, their anger, their frustration at God's seeming silence or abandonment in the face of suffering and chaos. And then we've got Psalms of reorientation. And I love these ones perhaps the most because they hold in one hand the truth of the human experience and our brokenness, but they also point us towards God. And they pave a path that you and I can walk towards reconnecting with God on the far side of suffering. So that's what this one does. Psalm 32, Psalm of reorientation. And David opens it by saying, "Blessed is the one whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered." So he opens with a beatitude. And when you have had your sins forgiven, just like I have had, you know what that experience is like. And it is a blessing to feel the weight of guilt and shame lifted, to be reconnected with that person who you wronged, or to be reconnected with God. David goes on to describe what happens, though, when you don't. "When I kept silent, my bones wasted away. He groaned all day long. Day and night he felt like God's hand was heavy on him. His strength was sapped." And so he does what I love about David is he ponies up. He exercises his will. He comes to God and confesses his deceitfulness, his iniquity. And he finds God to be good and forgiving. And he encourages us then in verse 6, "Therefore let all the faithful pray to you while you may be found. Surely the rising of the mighty waters will not reach them. You are my hiding place. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with songs of deliverance." I love this next part, though, because God breaks into it. In verse 8, he interrupts David. This beautiful line, "You'll surround me with songs of deliverance," and in jumps God, "I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. Do not be like the horse or the mule, which have no understanding, but must be controlled by bit and bridle." What a stark difference is that. A bit and a bridle is a piece of metal jammed into a horse's mouth. It is not comfortable. It's not a fun way to be taught or to learn. And that's not how God says. God says, don't be like that unthinking animal, but instead, I fix my loving eye on you, and I will instruct you. I'll have a conversation with you. I'll teach you the way that you should go. And what is that way? Well, many are the woes of the wicked, but the Lord's unfailing love surrounds the one who trusts in him. So, church, I encourage you, put your trust in the Lord. Come to him with confidence before the throne of grace and freely confess the ways that you have sinned against him, against yourself, against others. And I guarantee that what you will be met with are open arms and love and grace, saying, "I love you, my child, my son, my daughter." But don't be surprised when you do that. Don't be surprised then if the Lord leads you out of your quiet room where you met him and back out into the community, because confession is something that we as a community need to reclaim as a normative practice. We're too used to being stuck in our individual lives and thinking that spirituality and righteous religion is just between us and God. I love how constantly we talk about here at church that being a transformed people means that we're engaging the world around us. And if you're anything like me, that means that there's a constant need to confess, to humble myself. I did it to one of my good friends just this last week. I misspoke, and I was rude, and I had to go back to him and say, hey man, that was not the way to treat a friend. Like, I'm so sorry that I was wrong. Like, will you forgive me? And the feeling when that relationship was restored was so good. It was such a simple joy. And we should pay attention to simple joys. I hope that this week you can practice confession. You can hear it not as this loaded, shameful, religious term, but as this simple invitation to this practice that will ground you in the truth of who God is, this loving, trustworthy, hiding place, and reconnect you to yourself, to Him, and to the community. May you be blessed.